How are
Hello.
you?
Good, how are you?
Good, good,
Good, how are you?
good, good. Thank you very much for joining us and presenting today.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure.
Awesome.
She's going to give us a training on that. And Jillian, can you take it from here?
I got it. Hey, everybody.
Thank
So I'm
you.
going to share my screen. And so this is my perfect petitions training. So, and that is with Politics Mom. That's me. If you find me on social media, on TikTok or Twitter or Blue Sky, I am at Politics Mom. Um, so here we go. First, why do you care what I think about petitions? So I am the deputy director of Better Pennsylvania. We do economic prosperity advocacy work as well as democracy protection. I'm the chair of the Blair Dems since 2014, of the North Central Caucus since 2022, and the Rural Caucus since 2023. I have a BA in political science and a master's in political management. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about why these are important, how to sign them, some more rules, what I like to call the oopsies file, and then questions. So these are, Michael said, they're so important. They're incredibly important. So, number one, this is what gets you on the ballot. I don't want to see any write-ins. They are often your first introduction to voters on the doors. So incredibly important there. The number of signatures you get as a candidate can be sometimes like a reflection of how serious you are about it. And they give you a list of people who may well support you. So those are four pretty big reasons to take them very seriously. So number one, these are the questions that a candidate should be asking about petitions. So number one, how many signatures do you need to get on the ballot? So if you're running for state rep, it's 300. If you're running for state senate, it's 500. How many signatures do you need to make a splash? It's not 50 more than you have to get. It is 3 times. I tell all of my candidates, my expectation is that you get 3 times as many signatures as you need. Because if you have to get 300 signatures and you get almost 1,000, that tells me, number one, that you are really serious about talking to voters. And number two, you've already got a lot of support and you're already talking to a lot of people. If you're a congressional candidate, you have to get 1,000 signatures. Do you need to get 3,000 signatures? Yeah. I don't change the rules. They follow there for everybody. How many volunteers do you need to get signatures? So this is something that varies, but a general guide that I like to use. So every petition page has space for 30 signatures on it. Not every volunteer is going to get you 30 signatures. But 10 is a totally reasonable expectation. So whatever it is, divide it by 10. Now, that being said, you're going to have some super volunteers that are going to give you tons of signatures. So I would say that not more than 10% of your volunteers are going to be those kinds of super volunteers. So once you calculate out this is a lot of math and I apologize. Who knew that politics involved this much math? Once you figure out how many you need. So like if you were 300, right? Let's just go with the number 300 for right now for my ease. That's 30 volunteers. 10% of those is three. Three of those people are probably going to get me at least a full page. And so, we're going to kind of like come down a little bit, right? It's like you need like 27 volunteers, say. But that's really up to you. But I mean, obviously, the more the better. How are you going to recruit your volunteers? You should be talking to your county party. If they have regular meetings, which I hope that they're having, then you should be at them and you should be talking to folks. If you don't know, and you have access to Vote Builder already, then make a list of super voters and start calling. Talk to everybody you know that is close to you that's really excited about your campaign. Do you do any activist activities? You involved like in Indivisible or anything? Anybody that is sort of connected to this, even tangentially, you want to think about would they be willing to do it? And always go to them with a concrete ask. Who are you getting the signatures from? Well, everybody's gonna there are gonna be petition events, okay, where people are gonna come and they're gonna sign a petition. I like to follow the rule of fundraising. So when you're fundraising, 70% of your dollars should come from picking up the phone and calling people and asking them for money, and the rest of it can come from events. That's my rule for petition signatures. Don't assume that you're going to get more than 30% of them at events. Even if you could get all your petition signatures at events, I don't want you to. That's a bad idea because you're missing out on talking to voters on the doors. So you got to go knock those doors and get those signatures. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Who are you getting the signatures from? Genuinely, your steadfast folks, right? This is like the one time that I would say you should be canvassing super voters. Is during petitions because you're less likely to have to explain to them what it is that you're asking them to sign. Because petitions happen 3 weeks a year, and we train everybody every single year, no matter how many years you've done petitions, because people will forget things because it's the most hectic 3 weeks of your year. So super voters are good. They're also good potential volunteers, so that's helpful. But also, I think, if there's a particular demographic of folks that you want to get more involved, then put them in your list too. It depends on you. Stop! This is important. Use fresh lists. Never, never, ever, 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 ever use an old list. Get new lists. Get new lists every single time. I added this to my training because I had this happen. I had a candidate go, "Oh, well, I have this walk list that I had from last year." And I was like, "I'm sorry, you did what now?" Why? Why? Because the data is valuable. It's so valuable. Oh my God, there's so many uses for petition data. How are you going to use it? You can write thank you notes to the people that signed your petitions. Tag all your signers in Vote Builder. Use it as a fundraising list. Go back and see if they'll put out a yard sign. Invite them to your events. Ask them to volunteer. Like, these are people that you get to talk to. Take advantage of that. You got them. Keep them engaged. Okay, so let's look at how to sign a petition. And I'm very precise about this because Pennsylvania does not make anything simple. Everything that we do is complicated. So just, enjoy that. This is Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis's petition from 2022. And this is approximately what petitions are going to look like, with one adjustment that I will point out. Okay, so you got name of the office. In this case, Lieutenant Governor. If you're running for state rep, it'll be state rep, state senate, state senate. Year of the primary. Now, in here, there would be district number also, but obviously the Lieutenant Governor does not have a district. He has the whole state. Year of the primary will be 2026. The candidate's name, their current occupation, their residential address, city, borough, or township, the county of signers. This is extra important if your district is in more than one county. You can only sign a petition for the county in which you live. So if, for example, my candidate for Congress is Beth Farnham, I live in Blair County. I cannot sign a Beth Farnham petition that says Huntingdon County on it. That signature will get struck. And the party of signers, Democratic. You can only get signatures from registered Democrats. These are partisan races. There you go. We're flipping it over to the back. This is the statement of circulator. This should be filled out by the person who circulates this petition page. And it should only be filled out at the end. So once they are done getting signatures on that page, and they don't have to get all the signatures. I'm saying like somebody got you 10 signatures and they bring in the petition and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Thank you so much. You flip it over, you look at it. Oops, they didn't sign the thing. You haven't filled out the thing. Okay. Easy county of residence, printed name, signature, their address, their zip code. That's very, very simple. But make sure that that is filled out, and also make sure that it is filled out by the actual person who actually circulated that page. Okay. I will now like to take a minute to pour one out for all my homies who lived through having to get every single petition page notarized, because that is hell. One of the very few silver linings that came out of COVID is that we don't have to do that anymore. So just remember, we used to have notary parties to get all of these things notarized. It's exactly as fun as it sounds. Okay, so now we can sign it. All right. Here is the signature part. Okay. And I'm going to walk you through the bits and pieces. Hang on. Number one first, signature, then print. Not print, then sign then print. Funny, because if you recall back here, it was print, then sign. We don't keep things in the same order. That would be crazy. Now, the address could not possibly be difficult, could it? Ha 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 ha. Incorrect. So first we got our house number, just the house number. Very easy. Street or road, just your street or road. City, borough, township. Here's a catch. Now, I will tell you that my dearest friend Chuck Pascal will argue with me about this every day of the week, and I don't care. There was a court case that I will talk about in a moment, but when it says on that form, city, borough, or township, what they mean is the municipality that you actually live in. So like people in Altoona, right? Many of them actually live in Logan Township, but they have an Altoona address. So you want to prompt people with just say the municipality, and then they'll write the right one, right? Or if they ask, just, oh, it's the municipality where you pay your taxes, right? You should know where you are though. So you should be able to say like, we're in Antis Township. So that's what you should write. Now, will your signature get struck if they write their mailing address instead of their municipality? Probably not, because there's already been a case that said that's okay. You can write your mailing address. Like if the only thing that they sort of mess up, if you will, is that they write their mailing municipality instead of the municipality where they actually live, it's not that big a deal. But I am a stickler, so I always advise just prompt them to write the actual municipality where they live. And then their zip code wrong. You gotta watch this one. It's the date. You've just written your house number, your street, and your municipality or where you live. And then the thing in my head is now I'm going to write my zip code, but you don't. You don't. It's the date that you're signing it. So I have folks that do this that will put a Post-it note on their clipboard that says the date on it. Because if they get the date wrong, you could be looking at a bad signature in a couple ways. So do make sure that that date is correct. That is very important. Oh, sorry. I forgot I had this one. It's really, 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 really important. So we're going to get to some oopsies first. So when you're done collecting, number your petitions. After, not before. Make a copy of every single one of your petitions, because you got to take the originals to Harrisburg, and then they're gone from you forever. Well, they'll be in a digital file then, but that's a pain. Just make a copy so you have them. You're going to want to carefully check every single petition signature to make sure, yes, the date, format, month, day, year. I mean, honestly, it actually doesn't even really matter. The format is not super important as long as it is very clear that that's a good date. Um, so carefully check every single petition signature. Hopefully you've got some volunteers so you don't have to do that personally. But do make sure, I said it before and I'll say it again, train everyone. I don't care how many times they've done petitions. I have to give myself a refresher every year before I do petition trainings because this is very finicky. Okay. So here are some more rules. Only registered Democrats can sign petitions. You may not collect signatures before February 17th or after March 10th. So if you get annoyed with the Department of State because they don't have the petitions out early enough, it's because they don't want you to collect signatures before you're supposed to. So February 17th to March 10th. Only use blue or black ink. Yes, that is an actual rule. I have literally seen a petition get tossed because somebody used purple ink. Sucks. It had 30 signatures on it too. That was a real sad one. You may not sign more petitions for an office than there are seats open to run for. So, this is sounds weird, but all it means is, let's say you've got a primary where 3 people are running for state rep. You can only sign one of their petitions because there's only one state rep seat. In a municipal year, this gets a little more complicated because you got like 4 or 5 people running for school board. You got 4 seats. You can sign 4 petitions. But years in even numbered years, this is much simpler. 1 petition per office. So here's a note about registration. Somebody can either register to vote for the first time or change their registration on the same day that they sign your petition. Their registration, either new reg or change, must be dated the same day or earlier than the day that they sign your petition. That's all it takes. So make sure that you have the voter registration website bookmarked on your phone, just in case, because you never know who you're going to run across. You might have a friend who really, really thought that they were a Democrat, but actually they're a registered independent. So this is, again, why we cut lists, so that you know that you are knocking on the doors of registered Democrats, but in your life, presumably you're going to have folks that that want to help you out. But you should double check that registration. The oopsies. There are so many. This is a non-complete list because I don't think that I could possibly imagine all of the different ways that people have messed up petitions. So, printed, then signed. What do? Draw a line through the row, start over. And that is all you have to do most of the time. When somebody makes a mistake when they're signing your petition, all they have to do 9 times out of 10 is draw a line through that whole row, go to the next row and start over. Mailing address instead of actual municipality. Draw a line through the row and start over. You don't have to, but up to you. Zip code instead of the date. For sure. Draw a line through it and start over. Oops, not a registered Democrat. See if they'll change their registration. As long as they change it on that day that they got that signature, that you got that signature, you're good to go. The dreaded ditto marks. I'm looking at screens and I'm going to assume that everybody here knows what a ditto mark is. I do have to explain that to people who are younger than me. I am 44. This happens most often with older married couples. The husband and wife out, one of them signs first, and the other one signs and then prints, and then starts boop, 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 boop. No. With the ditto marks, they can usually just kind of write over them. it's like fine. But if it looks weird or becomes illegible, just have them draw a line through the row and start over. Out of order dates. This one can be complicated. And so this is the importance of remembering to tell people what the date is. Okay. Because if your dates are out of chronological order, then from the messed up date backwards, all those signatures are gone. So make sure that you are double checking, telling people, just prompt them, just say the date before they even ask, and then double check after. If it is the wrong date, you don't catch them, they write the wrong date. If as long as you're still there, just have them draw a line through and start over again. Not a big deal. Here's some best practices. Don't ever use gel pens. When the ink gets wet, it runs. And you don't want that. Your signature pages, they have to be legible. The people at the State Department have to be able to read them. Double check that you have the right petition for the area. Know what the date is. Always get a list for your walk from your county party or the campaign, depending, who's doing it. Don't stand in front of a store to get signatures, knock doors. Don't.
Hold up,
Not a good
time out.
idea.
Got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Now you know in Philadelphia what they do.
Oh, I sure do.
Okay. So can you explain that standing in front of a store?
Now, so in Philadelphia, this is probably this is probably less a big deal, but I would still say no. So basically you're standing in front of a store, right? And you're just like, hey, I'm running for this office. I need petition signatures. Would you sign? And maybe people will sign, right? Oh, I'm so sorry, excuse me. But they need to be a registered Democrat. So if you feel that you have to do that, and I don't think that you do, be ready to help people look up their voter registration. And double check. If you live in my area, that would be a fool's errand. Because between 25 and 30% of the people there are registered Democrats. Why would I waste my time? Also, none of the stores want to let you stand in front of them in my area. So that helps. Check the weather and dress accordingly. I say this all the time. And it is true. Although this year, I hope to God it's not. Petitions so often are the worst 3 weeks of weather that you have ever experienced in your life. It's so cold. It's just catastrophically blizzard or raining ice. It's awful. So make sure that you dress appropriately, that you got good shoes on, because I don't care what the weather's like, you still have to go out and knock doors. It's really, really important. In terms of petition challenges, don't pay people to get your petition signatures. Don't do it. Don't ever do it. Because I can Google right now and bring up for you a billion different stories in Pennsylvania of people getting knocked off a ballot that way, or getting in a crazy scandal that way. But I will say very proudly that amongst the people that I have trained to do petitions, I am not aware of any of them ever being challenged. In my county, we've only had, during my tenure as chair, only one petition has ever been challenged. It was last year, and it was the dumbest possible challenge. If you make your petitions rock solid, there is no point. But it is good so that's why you check. And it is good though to try to line up somebody just in case. See if your county chair knows someone, that knows how to handle the petition challenge process, because it's got a quick turnaround time. But and it is something that you will want to have a lawyer for. Nobody wants to deal with that. Do your petitions right, and then you don't have to handle it.
Call Chuck,
Jillian,
right?
Call Chuck Pascal.
Sorry.
Oh, last thing. Sorry. There's always a million different details. I think this probably goes without saying, but I'm saying it anyway. The people carrying your petitions also have to be registered Democrats.
And Vanessa will be helping us, showing us how to use Vote Builder.
sure, absolutely. Thanks, Mike. So I am going to share my screen. Hopefully it works. My cat really wants to be on this video all of a sudden. Okay, is that sharing?
Coming through, yes.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, so I've logged into Vote Builder. For any of you that use, Mobilize or Minivan, you would already, it basically typically uses the same ID and password as those applications. But you do need to get an account to Vote Builder specifically. And what your account grants you access to depends on what you're running for and who you're getting your access through. So in my case, I have it because I'm part of the Northampton County Democratic Committee. So my access grants me access to all of Northampton County. I can view, any data for people that live within Northampton County. I can also do quick lookups on people that are anywhere in the state, which means, I can enter in someone's name and or address or, whatever. And if they live anywhere in the state, I can see them. There are other people that have access, if you're running for state representative, you might have access across a couple counties, depending on what your state rep district is, but you don't have access to the whole county. You only have access to your state rep district. If you're running for, Congress, you'll have access, you get the access to the whole congressional district, but nothing else. So it's not that you can suddenly see everyone's data across the state just by getting access. It depends on what access you're granted by either the state party or your county party, whoever is giving you the access. And so once you're in there, and just to we have PCPs, people that are on the county party committee that only have access to their one precinct. So it can be, it can be very, very narrow. It can be very broad. If you're running statewide, you would have access to the whole state. It just depends on what you're running for. But once you're in there, there's a whole lot of different things that you can do. And there's a whole lot of different information you can get. This quick lookup screen is something that is very useful if you just, if you're talking to someone, if you have a conversation with somebody on the street and you got their name and you just want to know afterwards, hey, what was their party? What was their address? Could I send them a thank you card? Something like that. You can go into quick lookup and just enter in the information you have about them, and you'll be able to, see as long as they live in a district that you have access to, you'll be able to see that information. So I do that a lot when I'm having conversations. If I'm at like a festival and somebody comes up to talk to me, I just real quick enter their name in, and then it shows up, when I hit search, it'll tell me, okay, this is the person. It gives me information. It shows that I'm a Democrat. I live in the 18th Senate District in Northampton County, that I live in Wind Gap. It shows, your basic information. And if you click on the name, you can get a whole lot more information about them. All of this information that's in here can be very, very useful, especially when you're trying to figure out, when you're running lists. All of this information is stuff that you can create lists by. So it's categories that you can query in the database to say, hey, I want to get anybody who is age, 18 to 25, that's a Democrat that lives in this municipality. Like these are all categories that you can use. So the quick lookup is like a real quick hit thing to do, just to, get a feel for people you're talking to as you're talking to them. But most of what you're going to do as a candidate or as somebody helping a candidate is you're going to be running lists. Sometimes you're running lists just to pull numbers to figure out where, what the demographics are in whatever area you're running. And sometimes when you're pulling a list, you're going to be pulling a list because you actually want to go talk to these people. So For instance, for petitions, I didn't have access to Vote Builder the first year that I was helping people try to get petitions signed. And I live in a particularly red part of Northampton County, and I was trying to help Democrats get on the ballot. It was tough for me to figure out, where do I find 10 Democrats in an area to sign a petition to get this person on the ballot for school board or for, whatever they wanted to run for. This makes it so much easier because you just go in and you say, hey, I want to create a list. And you can make this as complicated or as simple as you want. So I'm just going to show you a really basic search to start out. So when you go in, for primary season especially, you're really focused on Democrats. As you go later in the game, you might be focused on everyone. So you might not want to do party, or maybe you're just trying to find your numbers of, how many Democrats, how many independents, how many Republicans are in your district. You may not want to do it by party, but right now for, primary season, if you're trying to find voters to sign your petition, if you're trying to find people that, if you're running contested in a primary and you're trying to find people to vote for you, you want to, select Democrats. So that's an easy one. You also, there's a lot of different categories you'll see as I'm scrolling through here. You have the ability to set things as favorites. And if you set them as favorites, they go to the top. So that means it's easier to find, basically. So the things that you do the most, the things you search by the most, you want to set as a favorite. So obviously I search by party all the time. The other one that I search by all the time is home district. And so for home district, you're able to select, it depends on what you have access to. So like I said, I have access to Northampton County. So if I want to search by state house, I can select any of the state houses that are in Northampton County. Now, some of these state houses actually cross over counties. So we have the 131st is in Northampton County. It's in a little bit in Lehigh County. It's in a lot in Monroe County. So I can only see, because of my access being through Northampton County, I can only see the Northampton County piece of the 131. But like the 137, the 138, those are all in Northampton County. So I can see everything in those. So a lot of the time I don't want to do it, I mean, if I'm helping someone in something that's completely within Northampton County, then I would search by state house. But I may know that I just want to look for a particular municipality. So, maybe I want to see all the Democrats that are in Easton, because this weekend I'm going to go in and I'm going to talk to all the Democrats in Easton to try and get them to sign my petition to get me on the ballot. So what you typically want to do, is the first thing you do once you put in these criteria is you say, I want to preview my results, just to see how many people is this going to return this list. And you can see when I hit preview my results, it's 8,418 people. Now, if if you have a huge operation going and a lot of people helping you out, maybe that makes sense. You could run this list, you could throw it into, minivan and have, you split it up into different turfs, and you have different people going to different areas, but you probably do not actually want to run a list with 8,418 people on it, because you're not going to be able to contact that many people. You might not be able to contact that many people yourself between now and November. So you almost certainly want to narrow this down more than that when you do this preview. And that's part of what doing a preview is good for, because it tells you, like, hey, have I narrowed this down to a reasonable amount of people that it makes sense to even run this list? So there's a lot of different categories that you can see. As you get closer to election day, you'll see that I have this early voting category favorited. The reason that matters is, as you get closer to election day, you're either going to want to see only people that requested mail-in ballots and had mail-in ballots mailed to them, because maybe you want to be going out and you want to be talking to the people that got mail-in ballots that haven't returned them yet. And that, hey, for the next few weeks, I'm focusing on them. And then, once it gets to the last week before the election, maybe you're no longer focused on the mail-in ballots. Maybe you're focused on people that are voting in person. So you may want to look at early voting from that perspective. You also, as it's getting closer and closer to election day, you probably want to exclude people that have already voted, because it doesn't make sense to run a list that includes people that have already voted. It'll say in minivan when you go to, canvass them that they've already voted, so you can ignore them, but it's still, if you try to divide things up and say, give me 50 people per turf, but half of them have already voted, you're wasting your time because you're sending somebody out and they're only going to talk to 25 people. So a lot of the time I do either include only people who have ballot mailed if I know that I want to talk to vote by mail people, or exclude people who have already voted. And these categories come up a lot as you get closer and closer to election day. There's all kinds of categories around that, with whether they've received a ballot, what their party is, things like that around the voting. The other one that I use a lot is voting history. So you're probably aware that how you vote, nobody knows. You can go into the ballot box, you can be a Democrat and vote for a Republican. Nobody knows. You can be a Republican and go into the voting box and vote for a Democrat. Nobody knows. But what we do know is whether or not you voted. We know every single election that you voted in. So you can say, hey, right now, I want to get petitions signed. And so maybe you really only want to talk to people that you know are very active in politics. Like they pay attention to every election. Those are the ones that are really going to vote in the primary. And they're, you may be able to convince some random people that know nothing about politics to sign your petition, but you also may show up on their door and they're going to say, why would I want, what are you even asking me for? I don't care about politics. I don't want to do this. So, for petitions, it may or may not matter what their voting history is, but once you start actually canvassing people as you get closer and closer to the primary, you're really going to want to talk to people that you know are voting in primaries. So you may want to say, include anyone who did any of the primaries. You may want to say, hey, show me anybody that did at least 2 of them. So it probably, you're probably understanding that municipal years, especially municipal primaries, a lot of people don't show up. They don't care. They don't think it's important. Congressional primaries, more people will show up, but not a huge amount because they still don't see that it impacts their life as much as it does. Even with Josh Shapiro on the ballot, a lot of people are not going to show up. But presidential years, people are really interested, especially if there's, any sort of contested race. They're going to show up for the primary and they're definitely going to show up for the general. So you might want to say, okay, show me anybody that did at least 2 of the following. And right now you don't really care about their general election history, but you care about whether or not they vote in primaries. So you may say, show me somebody that voted in 2 of the last 4 primaries. And so you can, go in and mark that. You have the ability also to say if they didn't vote or if they voted by mail or if they voted in person. So you can kind of, pick and choose these categories the way that it matters. So if I say, show me Democrats in Easton that voted in 2 of the last 4 primaries, it narrows it down to 2,078 people. So that's a significant cut to the number because a lot of people, even if they're engaged, they don't care about the primary. If I said, show me only people in Easton that are Democrats that vote in municipal primaries, which is 2023 and 2025, and I said, show me they did 2 of them, so it means they've voted in both, that cuts it down even further. So it really, there's different criteria you can use depending on what you're looking for. But you're basically going in and saying, what kind of voter are you looking for right now for whatever you're doing? And you could run hundreds of searches and get different results every time, depending on what you're looking for. So in this case, I have 1,300 people. That might be a reasonable amount, depending on what you're running for. If you're running for state rep, Easton is a large part of that territory. You need a lot of signatures, so that might be the right amount of people to look for. You might want to cut it down a little further. So maybe, maybe in this particular case, you want to look for, people that are of a certain age. Maybe you're older and you feel like you're going to be more relatable to older people, so you want to target them. You could go in and select people in a certain age range. Or maybe you want to target young people because you have a young message, whatever you want to do. There's activist codes. So there's a wide variety of these. This is something that kind of gets set up within your universe. So either by your county party, your state party, if it's if you're running for state rep and it's your campaign, you can add activist codes to people's names. So you might want to search for a particular activist code. You might want to search for people that have or have not been spoken to recently. So, if it's somebody that either has never been, never been talked to on the phone, never had a door knocked, or has been talked to recently, and you want to, like, maybe there was a phone bank, and you want to go and you want to follow up with those people and knock on their doors and talk to the people that actually responded. You can adjust, you can search by Canvas status, and include people that either were or were not canvassed. You can include a date range. So there's just all kinds of categories that you can search for. You can search by, let's see, anything else that I use a lot. Those are the ones I use the most. Oh, and scores. Scores are something I use a lot. So what scores are, these are things that are developed within the DNC, the coordinated campaign. There's different scores out there. And my understanding of the way these scores is generated is they buy a lot of lists from, wherever they can buy the list from, whether it's, sales, like car sales, shopping lists, whatever, online purchases on, these lists that people talk about being for sale, they buy them, and they use that, and they determine, based on voting records, based on party, based on what kind of car you own, based on, if you own a Prius, you're probably more likely to be an environmentally friendly person. You might be a Democrat, you might be support Democrat policies more. They use all kinds of things, and based on that, they come up with scores for things like, how likely are you to vote in the next election? Because just because you voted in the past doesn't mean you're necessarily going to vote this time. So, these are people that you should target for turnout. Or, the one I use a lot is the DNC Dem Party support, which is, are you likely to support a Democrat? So, depending on where you're running, you may be running in a territory where, like I'm talking about Easton right now. Easton is a very, very Democratic city. So if you're only running in Easton, you may or may not actually have to reach Republicans. You want to pull in everybody you can, but it may not be worth your time to be focused on Republicans. It may be worth your time to only focus on Democrats and independents. But then if you live in an area like I do, you're not winning election unless you convince some Republicans to vote for you. So you can't just run list by party and say, I'm going to hit up every Democrat's house and every independent's house and never touch a Republican. So what do you do in that case? Well, as I'm sure you're aware, if you've ever knocked a door, there are the complete MAGA Republicans. You show up on their doorstep, and there are signs everywhere, that talk about Trump, and there is no reason to knock on this door because they're not going to hear your message. And then there are other Republicans that have paid attention to what's going on in the world, and maybe they're still registered as a Republican because they've been registered Republican their whole life, but really they sympathize with the Democrats, and you want to get your message to them. So in that case, that's a situation where I would use this support score. It's not perfect. My parents, there was one year where I looked it up, and my parents had a higher Dem support score than me, and I was like donating to Kamala and knocking doors, and they're sitting at home, and it's not perfect, especially like the difference between an 85 and a 95 is not necessarily all that relevant. The difference between a 10 and an 80 is a huge difference. So it's kind of, you have to give a wide range and then look at what comes back and say, okay, what's worth targeting in this specific instance. So, today maybe you're running a list where you only want to talk to super Dems, in which case you might say, only show me 90 to 100. And then when you do that, if I preview my results here, it's going to significantly, well, it didn't actually narrow this list down because I'm showing, people that vote in every single election as Democrats. So they probably are mostly super Dems. So, but if you go and, if I hadn't had it narrowed down to only show primary municipal voters, if it was still that original 8,000 Democrats in Easton list, if I set this to 90 to 100, it would have narrowed it down significantly because, there's a lot of people that are Democrats, but they're not 90 to 100 Democrats. So I'm just going to pause for a minute to see if that's making sense, and if anyone has any questions before I move on and show you what you do from here.
Looks great. Thank you.
Okay. So once you have your list set, however you want it to be, and in this case, I have it at 1,200 people. You can hit this plus sign, by the way, just to see more information about what's there. So, this is how many people, but like if I'm running a mailing list, I might say I only want to mail to 1,000 people. Well, this 1,200 people is not actually 1,200 doors. It's 934 doors. So a lot of the time, if there's 2 people, 3 people in a house, the numbers go down significantly. So you can hit that plus sign to see more details to make sure your list is broken down to the level you want. But once you're ready,
Well, can you
you can
show them
hit
how
run.
to add a step
Yeah,
just in
I can do
case?
that. I
Yeah,
didn't want
show
to
them
make
how.
it too, yeah, I
Yep.
didn't want to make it incredibly complicated, but I
No, no.
can.
I'd like to add a
Um,
step. Yep.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. That's fine. So yeah, this first step is I'm saying, okay, show me everybody that's voted in a primary. In Easton with a high Dem support score. But maybe you don't want just that. Maybe you want, people that are likely to vote, people that recently registered to vote, so they're not likely, they haven't voted in primaries because they just turned 18 and they're recently registered. But the fact that they registered means they're probably going to vote in the next election because they're excited about their ability to participate. So you can add a step, and when you add a step, you can do any number of things. You can add more search criteria to add another group of people. So if you do add people, that's going to add to the 1,800 people you already have. Maybe you want to remove people if they, if they meet a particular criteria and you're like, you know what, I wanted these people, but I don't want people that have that voted in the 2025 election. Or you might want to narrow people and say, only show me people that are in a particular area. Or narrow by scores, or, householding is one that I do every now and then, where if I say, okay, I want to go in and I only want to show one person per household. So I don't want to have everybody listed on my list. I just want one person per household because I'm going to send a piece of mail and I don't need it to be, going to everybody in the house. You can say, okay, I'm going to narrow it down and only show people with only one person per mailing address. And when you go in and you preview that, it'll now limit it down to 934. And then maybe you say, okay, but now I want to add in people that are recently registered to vote. So I still only want Democrats because I'm doing petitions, but I want to try and include people that just registered. So you can go down to the voter registration. No, it's in the age category. It's not that one. So age and registration date. And you can say, okay, show me anybody that registered from January 2025 to today, because maybe they, didn't vote in those municipal primaries I was talking about because they weren't voters back then. So I say, okay, I want to add in any Democrat. Well, I'll show you a mistake that people make a lot, and this is why I always hit preview my results. So right now I said, show me any Democrat that's registered in the last year. If I hit preview my results, this number is going to balloon because I didn't say only show me ones that are in Easton. I said that this is going to show anybody that's in Northampton County. So I could do, municipality Easton, and now it's only going to add the people that recently registered. So that 934 went up to 1231. Another thing that you might want to do, and this is where I typically do add a step at the end to narrow it down, is if you know that every single time, no matter what you're adding in, like, so, the first time around you're doing Democrats that are over age 60 that vote in municipal primaries, but you're also adding people that registered between, in the last year, and you want to add anybody that's between the ages of 18 and 25. But in all of those cases, you only want Democrats that are from Easton. What, instead of every single time having to remember Easton and Democrats, you might want to add a step and narrow and say, okay, I'm going to narrow this down and I'm going to narrow it down to only Democrats and only Democrats that live in Easton. So at this point, you didn't need to put it in the other steps. You can just put it in this particular step without having to remember it every time. So as long as this is the last thing you're doing, narrowing the people down to Democrats in Easton, then you don't have to have that, criteria earlier on. So if you know that no matter who is included in your list, at the very end, you only want Democrats from Easton, no matter what other criteria is there, your very last step would be to narrow people down and to narrow it down to just Democrats in Easton. So all the rest of this could be, the whole county or the whole area you have. But then you add the narrow people down, and it makes it so that it's just Democrats in Easton, no matter what the other criteria was. So does that make a little bit of sense?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay. So then you run your search. And when you run your search, it sometimes takes a little bit of time, but it's not too bad. And what happens is you end up with a list. And the list is sometimes if you had run this with I forget what the limit is, but if I had run it with the 8,000 Democrats in Easton, all of them, I think this would have said there's too many people to, there are times where I'm looking at individuals on a list like this. So you can do all kinds of stuff from this screen. One thing that I like to look at is counts. So if you're running a list and you want to just know how many people are there in your territory. So you're running for state rep and you want to know how many Democrats, how many Republicans, how many independents, whatever your criteria was that you used to run the list, how many people match that criteria. You can just click this counts button and run a quick counts and crosstabs. And when you do that, you just have to give it what you want it to be listed by. So in this case, everybody on here is a Democrat. So I'm just going to say, show me their age. Usually I'm doing it by municipality, but in this case, everybody's going to be from Easton. So I'm not going to put municipality. Everybody's going to be a Democrat. So I'm not going to put party. Maybe I'll do gender. So you're going to end up, when I hit refresh, you'll see down here that it's going to tell me, here's all the males between 18 to 30 through 62. Here's all the females. It divides it out. So this is useful. Like I said, this list that I ran is all Democrats in Easton, but a lot of the time I'll do this by party. Sometimes I'll do it by score. Sometimes I'll do it by, to see how many people on this list are, between 10 and 20, how many people have a score between, 30 and 60 to try and decide, what do I actually want to target? So this just kind of tells you what's in your list and helps you figure out, maybe how you want to narrow your list down a little bit. So I do look at counts a lot to figure out, what am I actually looking at in the results that I got. The biggest thing you really do from here is cut turf. And so if you're going to be going out canvassing people, even if you want to knock all 1,200 doors between now and the end of February, you still want to have it organized in a way that makes sense. So what I do is I go in and I cut turf, and that's going to show you a map. And in this case, all these people are going to be in the city of Easton, because I narrowed it down to Easton. If you're running across a much larger area, your map is probably going to be much larger than this. But you're basically going in and you're drawing circles around people to get, to narrow things down into turfs. And there's different ways you can do this. So one thing you can do is say, okay, I'm just going to draw some lines here to make a circle because these people all live near each other. So this tells me there's 43 people across 43 households in this turf. That's kind of a manageable amount of people to go knock doors on. And you can just go through and, you can make large turfs, small turfs. Usually, after 50 people, you're tired and you don't want to keep knocking. So I don't make a whole lot of turfs with 117 people in it. I'm just, showing you that it's literally drawing circles on a map, to say, okay, here's my turfs that I'm drawing. There's also ways, I don't do it very often, but you can tell it to just draw for you. So if you want, you can tell it create the turf automatically. You can tell it if you want to group addresses close to each other or if you want an equal number of addresses per turf. And I usually group together, and then you tell it how many turfs you want. So, with 1,300 people, maybe you want 13 turfs, 14 turfs, something like that. You can tell it to auto cut. and it will go in and it will make turfs for you. Now you'll see here, because I told it group people together, I didn't tell it to put the same amount of people. These turfs all, mostly make sense, but like you'll look at turf 6 here and there's 215 houses with 227 people. That's too much for anybody to do in one day. Some of them are reasonable, some of them are like 24 people is probably small. 70 people might be okay in Easton because it's closely packed together, but up where I live, where it's rural, 70 people would take me all day. So,
Now,
your miles
Vanessa,
vary when you tell it to auto cut for you. I like to just draw the circles myself because I can make it myself. But if you're in a rush and you just want some turfs to go out with, you can tell it to auto cut for you.
yeah, Vanessa, can I make a comment on this one?
Yep, go ahead.
Now, this I have never seen territories this small because I do data for Black Men Vote in Philadelphia. So we do use auto cut because we're doing so big.
Right.
But in many cases, like Vanessa pointed out, you really don't want to do it. I mean, in a smaller one, you really want to organize because you want to make sure everything's efficient. But if you look at, so for example, you may even go in to make sure everything is tightly packed. Because if I look at like the little green area, that little green turf up there at the top, if I've got it's only 24 people, I may not even go to that. And I may look, that's why it makes sense to really do it manually for these sizes.
Yeah. And if you know the area that you are, like if you're running statewide, you're not going to know every community you're going into. But if you're running for a local office, you know your town, you know the roads, you know the places you're going. So that, I mean, sometimes this will draw things where it's, cul-de-sacs and it has you doing 2 houses on one cul-de-sac and 3 houses on the next cul-de-sac and leaving half of the rest of the cul-de-sac undone. That doesn't make sense. So, it depends on what you're doing. If you're running statewide and you don't know the area and you just want turfs to be there because you're handing them out to people to go work for you, it might make sense. But if you're, in a small area that then you probably want to draw them yourself because like this does not make sense for Easton at all. There's some that do and some that don't in this list. But as a quick, make it cut very quick, that works. So then you would just hit save and finish. Whether it's you doing it, whether you're auto cutting, you hit save and finish once you have it ready. You don't have to include every house. So sometimes you'll have like way outliers on your map. And if it doesn't make sense, you're not going to send anybody, you don't have to include them. You can cut the turf however you want. You can draw those circles however you want. It's only going to save the houses that are in the turfs that you draw. So you can create a new folder or put it in an existing folder. So, I don't have anything for 2026 yet. So if I just do 2026 test, create a new folder, this is all whatever you want to call it. So I'm just going to call it Easton Test Stems. This is what your list is going to be called. You can put a description in to explain what it is. You hit save. And what it's going to do is it's going to save off all of those turfs. And you can see here that it's now just showing me, okay, here's all the turfs. I could click on them individually and it would load those lists. So if I just wanted to look at one list instead of all 1,200, I could do that. Typically what you're doing at this point though is you're trying to get this either to minivan or to a PDF to print out, depending on, if you're using paper, if you're using minivan. Minivan is better. If at all possible, you want to have this data entered in minivan because people using paper is okay if you're just trying to get some petition signatures or whatever. But then either somebody's got to go in and do data entry to get it back into your database so you know that these people's doors were knocked and they liked you or they hate you or they didn't answer their door, or you just don't have that data. Whereas if it's in minivan, people are entering the data as they're knocking on the door. So it's much more helpful if it's in minivan instead of just on a PDF piece of paper. But you're also going to have some volunteers that don't have a smartphone, that don't know how to use minivan, that are, they're just like, give me a clipboard and a piece of paper. So you can do both. Either way works. But in this case, if I wanted to, generate a list for each of these turfs, I selected this button so it clicked all of them. I could just click one if I knew I only wanted to do turf 1 right now. You click the drop down and you can say print region. And if you print region, what it's going to do is it's going to let you pick a format. So there's all kinds of different formats. It depends on what you're trying to do. You can always see. So if I'm doing a petition signing, maybe I want to use this petition signing. If I click preview, it's going to show me what it's going to look like on paper. So in this case, the example is it gives me, their name, their address, what precinct they're in, which matters if you only want particular precincts. It, gives their phone number, their email. So, maybe this format works for you. Maybe you want to use, I use walk lists a lot. There's all kinds of different formats. So you can see if you click preview, it shows you exactly what information is going to be on that particular list. If you're printing something out, you want to have the minimum amount possible, because the more information on the list, the more, when you print it, the more pages it's going to take, and paper and ink cost money. But either way, you get, whatever it is you want. And then this is where it gets tricky, because people mess this up all the time. It will print however you tell it to print. But if you leave these page breaks marked, every time the county changes, the precinct changes, if the street name page break was, every time that changes, it's a page break. So you'll end up printing, like 5 addresses on a page, and then it goes to a new street and it's 5 addresses on that page. So typically, unless you have a reason why you want these page breaks, I usually uncheck them, because, I don't want to split it up onto multiple pages. I want everything to print together if I can. The group headers, that just shows what, like every time it changes, that just gives you a header to say, hey, we're on a new county, or we're on a new precinct, or we're on a new street. So, depending on what you're doing, you might want to show that. And then you can choose how you want to sort it. So if you know that somebody's going out walking, and they want to do all of one street before they move on to the next street, then you might want to sort by street name. If you know that somebody's making phone calls, you might want to, sometimes there's reason to do things alphabetically. It all depends on what you're using it for. But however you tell it to sort, that's how it's going to sort. You can do all kinds of people. You can include a map to show where you're going. You can, include driving directions. There's all kinds of stuff at the bottom that you can do to adjust the settings, but I'm just going to, do a basic one. So you hit next, and it's going to create a PDF. And you can go into my PDF files, and it's still working right now, but if I hit refresh in a minute, it'll probably be done. Okay, so then I can go in and I can just download this file. And when I download this file, if you've done canvassing, if you've had an organizer kind of organizing things for you, you've probably seen this cover page here. And it is, here's the list number, here's how many people, here's how many doors. You can check people out on this cover page here. So if the only thing you want to print is this first page, it's still useful to print this page just to have a record of, who's doing what for you. And then if there is a script associated, which I apparently included a script, it'll tell you what the script is underneath, for, here's what the questions are. And then after that, you're going to see, the map, all the houses that you're hitting, and then you'll see, whatever format you wanted to print the list as. And you can see here, this is what I was talking about with the header. So right now it's showing a new header for every new street. If I had that page break marked, every time there's this header, instead of a header, it would be a new page. And then, this is printing out every single turf. So you can see, if I scroll to the bottom, I think there were 14 turfs. So this is showing me all 14 turfs, one by one. So you can just print this out. The other thing you can do is you have to have a script associated, which in this case I do, but you can take these numbers and you can just plug them into Minivan. So for those of you that know what Minivan is and have used it to canvas, that's how you generate a list number. You can take this list number, plug it into Minivan, and then you're not working off the paper, you're working off the application instead, which is much better for, getting data back into the database. Because everything somebody knocks on a door or gets data from Minivan, it goes back into the database. So that was like a long but quick overview of Vote Builder. There is so much in Vote Builder. But are there any quick questions I can answer? right, awesome.
Vanessa, great job. Fantastic. Can you briefly talk about the importance of targeting?
Yes, I apologize, Mike. I was trying to rush through stuff, so
That's
I
no
did
problem.
not do that.
Oh,
It's tough to get through it all because there's so much,
sure.
in Vote Builder that it's yeah, it can be tricky. So yeah, let me just pull up the document that you showed, and I will share my screen again real quick. Um, so if you're running for office, you need to know what your universe is. And if you take any training class, they're going to tell you, one of the first things you need to do is figure out your universe as a whole. And you need to figure out, how many Democrats, Republicans, and independents are there, but then also, who are you actually reaching out to? Because it does not make sense. People want to talk to super Dems. And every time somebody asks me to run a list, they want me to run the super Dems because those are the fun people to talk to because they agree with you. But those aren't the people you want to be talking to. I mean, you need to talk to them a little bit. You need to make sure they know who you are, why you're running, and that they should support you. But once you've had a basic conversation with them, especially if you're the only Democrat running, they're going to vote for you. They're going to hit the Dem button no matter what. So spending a lot of time with them does not make sense. It also doesn't make sense, like I said, with the scores, to be talking to the hardcore Republicans that no matter what you say, you could be a gun-toting, whatever it is that they care about, they are not going to vote for you because you have a D next to your name. It doesn't make sense to talk to them either. So that's the unreachable opposition. You don't want to bother with them. So what you really need to be doing is figuring out the numbers of how many people there are that you should be reaching out to. And you can do that, just by putting in the criteria and hitting preview. You don't even have to run a list because you don't care about the specific people up front. You want to know just what are your numbers. So you can go in and say, okay, and who you're targeting over time is going to change. So when you start out, you maybe are trying to reach, people that are persuadable to convince them to vote for you. So if it's somebody that is independent and sometimes they vote Dem and sometimes they vote Republican, that's worth your time to focus on them, to try and convince them to vote. As you get closer and closer to the election, so over the summer you might want to be, persuading people. Then you get closer to the election, you probably want to be reaching out to infrequent voters and new voters and convincing them, hey, by the way, there's an election coming up. They might not even know that there's an election coming up. This past year, for municipal elections, a lot of people didn't realize there was an election because Donald Trump wasn't at the top of the ballot and they didn't know. So you may want to be reaching out to them. You want to be careful with who you're reaching out to because you don't want to remind an infrequent Republican 2 weeks before the election that there's an election coming up if they're not going to vote for you. So you kind of want to target based on what you know to try and find people that are likely to vote for you if they remember to vote. Those people you want to remind constantly. That's why people get texts nonstop as we get closer to the election, because they want to make sure people know there's an election and don't forget to vote on November 5th, November 6th, whatever the date is. So those are the new and infrequent voters that they're kind of not the highest targets. You want to make sure that you're focused on the persuadables first. But then once you're done going through your persuadable universe, then you might be moving on to your new and infrequent voter universe to try and find people that you believe would vote for you if they remembered to vote. So you don't necessarily want to be going after Republicans that are infrequent voters. You want to be going after Dems that sometimes vote, or independents with a high Dem support score that sometimes vote, and say, okay, you want to do this. But the first step of all of this, and something that you want to be doing, now, is get access to Vote Builder and go in and start running numbers to figure out how many there are. So, you can say, okay, here's how many frequent voters there are that are persuadable. Here's how many newly registered voters there are. Here's how many infrequent persuadable voters there are. Figure out, what's the total number, and then figure out how many of them you think you could possibly reach. And you want to go in and start, then you can build a calendar and say, okay, I've got 2,000 people I've got to reach between now and November, me personally. So if I have, 10 months to do it, how many voters do I need to reach every month? And then go from there, figure out this is, the number of people I need to be reaching. And some months are going to be better than others. Like as you get closer to the primary, that's a great time to be reaching voters that are Democrats because they're not confused why you're reaching out. But over the summer, people don't really want to talk, and it can be really difficult. It's a slot. You can try, and you should try, but you may or may, the summer is more like you're going to community events and things, and you do want to knock doors, but a lot of people are going to be like, "Why are you talking politics to me? It's July, and I want to have my 4th of July party." And then but then when you get to the fall, it's all hands on deck. You want to be knocking as many doors as you possibly can in September, October, and early November. So you kind of can plan out your calendar based on how many voters you think you need to reach based on the data that you pull from Vote Builder.
Okay, Vanessa, thank you so much. Are there any questions for Vanessa? Okay. Thank you so much, Vanessa. We appreciate you, and great job. Thank you so much for that presentation. But right now, I'd like to introduce
the election 10,000 times. We can review it.
Ooh, oh, okay. All right. Was that me? No, I don't think that was me. Anyway, right now I want to introduce Rajette Harris. And Rajette is the chair of Dauphin County Democratic Committee. And Dauphin County just recently flipped blue because of all the efforts by Rajette. Rajette also is the only African-American elected chair of the PA Dems. So Rajette, thank you so much. Can you come on and talk about putting it all together? With how do you know what your vote number is?
Thank you. I'm just going to spend a few minutes to talk about your vote goal. As we all know, the goal of every campaign is to earn enough votes to win on election day. So everything we do, which we heard tonight, whether it's field communications, fundraising, connects back to one thing or vote goal. That vote goal should be one of the very first things a campaign determines because every strategy decision will flow from it. And Vote Builder is a great way to help calculate that vote goal for yourself. So what is a vote goal, also called a win number? It is the number of votes that you need to secure victory. And to calculate it, you need two key pieces of information. So you need to know the number of registered voters in your district that you're running in. And you also need to have the voter turnout percentages from the last 3 comparable elections. For example, if you're running for a school board, I wouldn't use the turnout from a presidential race because obviously those turnouts aren't going to be comparable. So you would want to look at the turnout percentage from the last comparable races to what you're running for. For example, the previous 3 school board elections. You can get this information from Vote Builder. You can get this information also from your county elections office. So there's different ways to get this information. Using that data, you can make an educated estimate of, number one, how many people are likely to vote, and then what that 50 plus 1 looks like in real numbers, because that's obviously what you need to win. That number then becomes essential for your campaign. If you don't know how many votes you need, you don't know who you need or how hard you need to work to reach them. So that's where your field plan and your strategy comes into play. I do want to stress that instead of talking to everyone, as previous speakers have also said, what's more important is talking to the right people, the voters most likely to help us reach our vote goal. So in summary, the takeaway of what I'm saying basically is your vote goal determines what winning looks like. Number 2, your win number tells you how many votes you have to earn to reach that vote goal to win. And then finally, targeting tells you where to spend your time and resources to get there. Targeting isn't about cutting corners. As we all know, we love to talk to everyone, but we can't. But it's about working smarter, staying focused, and making sure that every action that we do within a campaign takes us closer to victory. So if we know our vote goal and we target intentionally, every door knocked and every conversation had matters more. And that's how we win campaigns, not by doing everything, but by doing the right things and talking to the right people.
Thank you so much, Rajat. Now, are there any general questions? I know it's almost 8 o'clock. We'd like to keep to that, but are any questions? I want to go over something very quick, but are there any questions for Rajat? Because vote goal is so important. I can't tell you how many people I've known and talked to in the past that had no idea what their vote goal was and what they wanted to hit. Numbers are the way you win, right? So that's important. Are there any additional questions? Okay. So the last thing that I'm going to cover very briefly is what do you have to do to set up a campaign? And setting up a campaign is not that difficult. The first thing you have to do is get an EIN number, okay? An EIN number, all right? Because I'm assuming everybody's going to basically have more than $250. You know, if you get more than $250, you need to set up a campaign pack. In order to get a campaign pack, you need an EIN number, right? Can everybody see down on the screen? To do that, you can go directly to irs.gov, get an employee ID number, EIN number. That's all you have to do. The next thing, in terms of explaining the process is, and I'm inviting everybody to do this, is to go to the PA Dems Black Caucus website. And in there, you can go to candidate resources. In candidate resources, we go through, touch the resources here. And then we have all the processes for running a campaign, right? How do you run field? What's the roadmap to be successful? Here's a candidate guide, compliance and direct mail, election calendar, vote builder, fundraising, advanced vote builder, advanced fundraising, PAC setup. We've got Emily's list, which is a PAC and also engage for Muslims. But for PAC setup, you just touch that right there, and it walks you through the steps of the process, what you have to do, and also, right, the EIN number is the first thing that you do. And then it gives you an example of how you actually fill out authorization for a political campaign to receive the funds. Okay? That's all you have to do to set up a PAC. All right? So I'm going to stop sharing it right now, but just to also show you, right, the PA Dem Black Caucus has got all the resources set up to understand how to run campaigns, run productive campaigns. We're also looking for members, and the website is here to set up, looking for attorneys, we're looking for co-directors, we have a voting center, right? What directors do, our voter ID project, become a member of the Black Caucus. Everything is right here under the PA Dems Black Caucus. I really want to thank all the presenters today. They've done a fantastic job. It is approximately 8:02. We started on time. I believe in ending on time.